Tadhg Dornan. I'm the senior performance analyst for the Dublin Camogie team. Um, how I got to this role is that I did the level 4 course, the performer course in Athlone I'd say it's about a year and a half ago at this stage. And at that stage, I was both playing and the analyst for our club football team. From then on, I convinced the club to buy the license. And then once that was, then I just completely took off and redid. So we had the videos for all of our championship games and club games up to that point. So I just got the lads to send me them, and then just went over and did the stats. Just learned from then on, just basically hands-on approach from then. And then they were blown away by it, and then just continued on in the club from then. Took over with the hurling team as well, which is great because it gives you both sides of the codes, so you don't have to stick with football. But at that point, I was the player as well as the analyst, so I knew everybody and everybody knew me, and I was used to what was going on in training, and I have my own ideas as to what was working and what wasn't working, and I could then manipulate this, not just like subjectively, but I could manipulate it as in like show the coaches what as players what we thought was working and what wasn't working. So I was able to kind of stray that line quite well. Especially in the hurling side of things, when I went over to because it's a slightly different group of players in the club, although there's a huge amount of crossover in terms of dual players. There was lads that I hadn't come across yet, and it was a totally different philosophy, totally different way of playing a game that I obviously had stopped playing hurling for a good few years at that point, but they'd been quite successful, and they just wanted to know like what was working for them and what wasn't. So again, I had a whole backlog of games that I got to go through, and then show them like what was going on, what wasn't going on. If the stuff that it was a different perspective as well, because I didn't know what their game plan was or their style was. So I was then able to see that when they told me was it working, was it showing on the pitch, was it actually like what are the things they're working on showing up. And then it was, so we had a great campaign that year. I was involved doing loads of stats. I think we got to the Leinster club semi-final and lost, but up to that point it was great. It basically showed that I was able to do both codes, and from then on I just I applied for the job for the Dublin senior Camogie analyst team, and I got it as well, which is great. And that threw you into a whole new standard of things. Obviously the managers have set out a game plan and a system of play, and I try and come up with KPIs around that to try and see like which would work best for the outcomes that they're looking for. So during training, we started off a lot. I had grand ideas of video in every training session, trying to come up with repeatable drills to have like quantifiable outcomes. So as in like number of passes per minute, number of drop balls per minute, or something like that, around those things. But there's all really good intentions for these things, but sometimes it's like you're kind of drowning in video and footage and data, and sometimes it just doesn't materialize or work as best you can. Sometimes like the player base, obviously for other county teams this might change, but from Camogie anyway, there's different reasons why people can't play, like as in jobs or leaving cert. So you might have a change in player base all the time. So these things don't always work out, but sometimes they do. But aside of this, I'm still a player at the end of the day. So I still the straight line of like player, coach, and management team. Like I coached the under 15s teams or the under 16s in our club at the same time as playing and being the analyst. And they won the county championship. So I was able to have a whole year of coaching under my belt, especially of juveniles. So I had my own idea of drills or whatever. And then when I went into the Dublin setup, they didn't have a goalkeeper coach. So I became the impromptu goalkeeper coach as well for a while for Camogie, which is great. Because I got one of the major things in hurling and Camogie is puckouts and just goalkeepers being solid, I suppose. So the managers had their ideas for puck out strategies and system of play in the forwards. And from talking to the goalkeepers, we came up like just I have my own ideas on them, but I wanted to see what they were thinking, and just the puck outs just weren't working, and I had to come up and show. I had two kind of weapons to use. Was that I had footage of them not working, and B, I had different ideas from the players because I was kind of integrated in that setup as well. And I'm the same age as a lot of them as well, so that they would have a different rapport with me than with the management team, because there's just not that age gap, or they don't see me as like a senior member of the management team, so it's more of an open conversation. So from then on, it's just more like, rather than I use kind of that to my advantage almost, whereby I don't have big video sessions all the time like we do before big games, like all the championship games. We sat everybody down and walked through it. But in training and before training, because the iPad is so easy to bring around, I just go up to players and kind of have a chat with them, and then say like, "I'll bring it up." So you can ask them how you're doing. So you're building up a rapport with players. But then you can, like, rather than just straight up going, "Oh, I need to show you this," which does happen from time to time. But I'm able to like make it an easier conversation to have and make them more interested. And then on top of that, you kind of target which players are more interested in these things, and you have to feed them more. And then other players, you can just every now and again just kind of top them up with something. But there is some players in the team, and you can see that when they log in and who's not logging into the online platform, who's actually interested and who's not. Uh, from a player, the biggest thing is transparency. So either whether it be for videos or stats or whatever, or just letting the player know that she's not playing. That's the biggest thing. And so even for the players that were playing in those games and felt they played well, to give them an answer as to why we were losing matches was probably more beneficial. While the players who were coming on, there was some very clear reasons as to why they weren't being picked, or there was kind of that reason of, some players, there's that unknown reason why they're not being picked, but like you can't put your finger on it. Even as management, you're just like, "Ah, she's not there yet." But what does that mean? And when you can put a number behind that, or like even just show it, you're like, "Okay, that's the reason why." They're just not impacting things the way other players might do, or they're not offering us a way to win puckouts or shots from play or something like that. And so if we take the Galway, so we played Galway in the first round of the championship, and we wanted to implement. So if we take 2 weeks before that, or no, we'll just take a week before that, we had implemented a style of play, and we wanted to look at Galway's puckouts. There's basically like, the girls hadn't really had much video analysis the year before, so we're still hesitant to like throw huge amount of information at them. I kind of break it down into kind of three main areas really, which is puckouts, attacks, and then what's Galway's defensive shape. So it's in like, how do Galway attack, how do they defend, and what is their puckout strategy. And so the week before that, I had prepared 2 or 3 videos on Galway. So I watched 2 or 3 games, and on the Monday, I had said that on Tuesday, which is our training session, I wanted everyone to sit down for 15 minutes just before the training session started. So the day before, I don't really offer the players anything before that meeting, but they know really to expect that there's going to be 3 main areas to work with. And then on that Monday, I would look at the results from the analysis and then give it to the management team and see if that fits in with the training plan, or to see if I can come up with a drill or a variation in a drill they're using that I can implement, like what I'm seeing from the video, into what their training is. And that could be as simple as, just, so let's say Galway played one sweeper in the first half, and then later on games, if they're winning and they really want to win, they put in a second one. So that was simply just, they were playing a game of backs and forwards towards the end. I would just say to them, "Okay, we need to take one player off the attacking team, put in a sweeper, and then in the last few minutes put in a second one," just so they're used to it and they get the idea as to what's going on. The second one was, Galway like to swarm the ball. So if the ball breaks down, if a hand pass goes astray, they kind of feed off that and they hunt and they swarm the player, and that ball has to be moved away from that contact area as quick as possible. There's no engaging in that. So I said to them, okay, I need like 5 minutes just to implement this drill whereby somebody drops the ball. We have an artificial swarm of players, and that ball has to be moved away just to get that muscle memory in place. So I had made sure that that drill was in place on the Tuesday and Thursday before the match on the Sunday. And then when we went in to training on the Monday, everyone just sits down and I break it down real simply. Go through maybe max 3 or 4 clips per segment. So as in like, unless there's a huge variation in the puck outs. Unfortunately, this year it didn't actually equate because there's a new puck out rule in Camogie whereby you don't have to wait for a whistle, which was in place before this year. So Galway actually ended up taking a lot more quick puck outs. But that didn't really matter, really. I just said, like, okay, they go long, they play the hurl, let that ball. Oh no, sorry, they bat the ball down to themselves, and then somebody picks up the second ball. So it's a very intentional no catch rule, or it seemed that way anyway. So that was very straightforward. And then like attacking wise, you just lead them through that, and then defending wise, it was the 2 sweepers and the swarming of the defense. And then I would kind of chill out for the rest of that training session or help out if I had to do anything else. And then on Thursday is when I get more. But what I wanted to do was trying to like re-emphasize how good some of them are as players. So again, for this championship year, we had a huge amount of debutants, like people who hadn't played championship before. And I just wanted to re-emphasize the fact that they had played all year. They played like 8 matches up until this point, or 6 challenge games or whatever, and they'd done really well. So I basically just waited outside the dressing room before the train started, and then just as they were coming in, I would just say, "Oh, can I see you for 5 minutes?" And we'd have a chat, and I would just show them videos of other matches. If they're a defender, it was making tackles, making rucks, I don't know, starting attacks or whatever like that, and then just re-emphasizing to them like what they have to do when they get the ball, and then just so they're more focused going into the dressing room. And I think that helped as well. I think like it built up a kind of championship atmosphere, and like this was quite a big game, but then also re-emphasized the fact that they're capable of playing well. So that was basically it, my week before that, and I have replicated that since. Then in other weeks before that, because I had one championship game under my belt, and then going forward, I harked back on what worked well, what did we take into account in the last championship game, and what I showed them and what we didn't do. So as in like, I showed you this, but it didn't materialize on the pitch, and this is how Galway still did what I said, sort of thing. Not to show them that I'm great or anything, but I'm just saying, re-emphasizing to them how important it is to kind of take note of these things and don't become at a high level. You basically can't be reactive as much, as in like, you should take the material that you have been given to you before a match so that you're prepared for certain styles of play, rather than reacting to it and being kind of caught out. Like it should just be in the back of your mind that like, if you see it on the pitch, then you know kind of what's going on. It was very kind of broad, vague descriptions. So I was in like, oh, you have a good short grip, her good hands, very quick, like descriptions. But they had no solid evidence as to how the player was progressing or how she compared to other players. So that was then I was brought in and said, I can just go through the stats from every game. So I did exported everything from perform for each of the games. So for all of our challenge games and all of our championship games, and just kind of broad stroke them. So just at challenge games where it was all blocked as challenge, that they weren't individual. Some of the games were like 4 quarters, let's say, or like 3 periods. So it was, you couldn't compare directly. But then like the the championship games were on their own. So if people played in them, then you could see how they progressed through the championship, or the league, sorry, not championship, and how they progressed through the league, and or how they didn't progress, or like, let's say, why didn't you start in this league match but started in another league match. So that was really easy. And because we had played so many games, so some girls probably played like 11 games, it gave me a good average to look back on. So I had all this done before starting the meetings. So let's say if we had a halfback playing, a halfback was there and she didn't play any of the league games, but wanted to know why, I could go back and look at kind of the average like tackle count, or the average possessions lost, or the average attacks that they created, and see where they stood. So see what they were offering us in comparison to other players. And I spun it in a kind of more positive way. So I made sure that I didn't just look at why they didn't start, and it's like what they are offering us, but versus what other players are offering us. So what basically what it came out is a lot of our defenders are defenders, and they're not offering us things going forward. So that was very easy to bring back to them. And then like attackers just aren't shooting enough, and that's why we're losing games, and that's why we're just not creating enough attacks. But then at the same time, what really came out of it is I call it like a KPI number. So as in, it was like the total number of actions that they had in the game. So this is like discounting actual possessions. Like I didn't go back. I just kind of gave it as a rough estimate. So it did work out as in like our midfielders are the most influential. They have like a high KPI number. And then some of our forwards might only have a very low KPI number. But then I was able to look at that over the course of a game. And it turned out that 10 minutes after half time was just when everyone kind of fell flat. It was nobody had a high KPI number, as I called it. And it just showed that as a team, we were like consistently disimproving in the second half of games. And that's when the other teams it was correlated that they were scoring against us. So I was able to provide this information. Like I know this is like weeks and weeks away from actually playing a game, but to have that as kind of like a starting point again, just to remind them of what's going forward, and now what's expected of a player in your position. So now we can go back and remind players that, okay, if you're a halfback, we need you to make 6 tackles a game and have 4 turnovers or something. And that's a target. Like they're reasonable targets. They don't sound like very much, but I think the ball's only in play for 25 minutes or something in a Camogie match. The big thing, I suppose, that it affects that answer a little bit was I was kind of coming in from the cold as well in Dublin. So like nobody knew who I was. I wasn't attached to any club, because obviously I'm from Wicklow, so I didn't know like some of the club teams in Dublin or anything like that. So I was very conscious of the fact that I didn't want to come in and be negative, or to be I know, kind of like having that attitude of I know everything, or I can fix these things. I kind of came more like a student of the game almost, whereby I kind of took things in for a long time, or if I would see small things that I thought were really good, I would offer to them very early on. But I'm now at the stage whereby I think I can start to be the fixer, or to start demanding more of players, as in like kind of calling them out would be the wrong way of putting it, but you know what I mean, as in like showing somebody a clip and be like, almost like, why did you do this, or like, what are the options available to you here. I would say that this isn't for everybody, although I probably not what it expected me to say, but I remember going through this with different management teams or different coaches or whatever. And so by this isn't for everybody, meaning that if you join a coaching setup, um, almost you can unfortunately find yourself in a scenario whereby the coaches feel like they have to have video analysis and they have to have stats, and it's a standalone thing, whereby you just give a presentation and the players kind of learn from it, but it's not impacting anything else. Like it's not interacting with training session. It's not impacting a game plan sort of thing, and it's just there to be found out and to be left alone. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that you do have to be quite objective of doing this, and you almost have to sacrifice a certain amount of enjoyment from the game. Um, so therefore, if you're find yourself in a scenario whereby you're caught up in the game a lot, you're full of emotion, this may not necessarily be the job or the aspect for you. It may mean that you do things post match, whereby you can sit down, you can look at things thoroughly. But just for people going forward, if they are finding themselves in that scenario, that it's not for everybody. So just I'm kind of giving the other side of the opinion that this is brilliant, as in you can provide real insight into things. And I love the feeling of proving coaches wrong about players, because as a player myself, I get certain feelings about um, players are good or underrated by the management team, and I almost want to find out why, or find reasons why, or like get people to start. And that's one of the real enjoyments, is if you see a player that you think deserves to play, and then you can show them reasons why and video clips why, and then they do start and play well. There is a sense of satisfaction about that, as in like you've done a service for that player, and